The wind on the rooftop had teeth, lifting the corner of the red linen that held the reservation ledger like it wanted to see who we were before we said our own names. Karachi was softer far below traffic, like a tired river, but up here the lights were a hard white. And the sea smell was iodine and coin. I stood under the heat lamp, my coat collecting stray sparks of dust, while the hostess leaned over the podium and tried the joke again for the table of 4 behind me. "Names go left to right," she said, and when I didn't laugh, she tapped my temporary name tag with a lacquered nail. "But what even is that? Are we supposed to sing it?" She sing-songed the syllables, wrong on purpose, slow enough so the quartet could enjoy each beat. It was a strip of laminated paper, the kind they hand to off-duty staff who come as guests. "Hello, I'm and," then the fill-in with the fine-tip pen. I had written my full name because I like things complete, because my grandmother had taught me that a name is a certificate and a map. The pen in her hand felt borrowed from some other place I knew, and it took a second to locate which. The chipped barrel, the dark groove near the clip where someone had bitten down. A register bell chimed inside the bar, and I made a single decision, one of those that makes the next 1,000. "Anila," I said, calm enough to still the edge in my throat. "Feel free to use either." I pointed to the line where I had written my family name neatly in Roman Urdu. The hostess laughed. Not unkindly, but the novelty had missed the cut for me. Somewhere behind the steel of the pass, the hiss of shrimp hitting a pan settled into something like steam and rain. The quartet behind me decided they, too, would sing my name. They tried it 3 different ways. A waiter with a tray of pale martinis slowed to watch. The green of the olives harder under the rooftop lights than any green outside. This was a perfect and irritating geometry. My holiday table set for 8. The city, a velvet box around the rooftop, and a sliver of plastic just under my shoulder bone that had already changed the temperature of the night. I learned a long time ago not to raise my voice when the room tips. I can calibrate a room to facts. "We have a private space booked," I said. "The mezzanine niche. Confirmed under the last name that you are looking at but not pronouncing. 10 p.m. It's 8:57. Behind me, my mother touched my elbow the way she does when she wants me to do the thing. The soft go-ahead that used to be what I lived for. To my left, my younger cousin Rafi stood with his arms folded over his chest, wearing the restaurant's black shirt and the management badge he liked to wear slightly off-center. He had insisted this rooftop was the only place that could do justice to the first night of our whole family in one city in 5 years. "They know us," he'd said. "I'm shift lead here. We'll be treated like family." A gust of wind, smell of brine and diesel, lifted the corner of the hostess's seating chart. Her eyes flicked not to me, not to my family, but over my shoulder, and she said, "You're lucky Rafi's here," and tilted her chin toward him in a small domestic flourish that said she thought she was doing me a kindness by letting me know where to place my gratitude. My name on the tag caught the light like silverfish. Say my name with respect. In the next minutes, I said to myself, the way I narrate when I want to make sure I remember, you'll see how a laminated strip can be a fuse, how one micro joke finds its weight, how a room can be resized with a line in a handbook and a time stamp. You'll see how quiet can be an instrument and not a retreat. My grandmother's scarf, the ivory one with the hand-tatted fringe, the one I keep folded in my handbag for cold planes and overcooled waiting rooms, was suddenly over my shoulders. That woman never left a granddaughter unarmored in any room. Even gone, she reappeared in angles and textures. The air heater ticked. The mezzanine windows reflected us and the city in separate panes, like we were being asked to select which reality was ours. The quartet behind us decided to pick a new favorite appetizer, and their voices moved away like the tide. Rafi didn't apologize. He didn't need to, he thought. This wasn't that kind of thing. It was a joke, and anyway, people didn't care. He stepped into my line of sight and began his own script. "They're slammed," he said. "Everyone's tense. End of year. You know how it is." He always spoke like he was smoothing a tablecloth. His words were efficient and without lint. He had his phone in his right hand and the staff radio in his left, 2 leashes he liked. The hostess rolled her shoulders back, a dancer resetting her frame. And someone somewhere flicked the light behind the bar to a shade warmer. The room slackened a notch. You could feel money and service resuming their dance. My father coughed into his hand and blew the air through his teeth. The way he does when he's worried I'm going to do something exact? I leaned over the podium, careful not to crowd. Mezzanine niche, I repeated. And then I made my request in the same tone I use in client sites when the factory manager is sure I'm the intern. Please pull up the confirmation email and the guest notes. It landed more like a sentence than a request. In my bag, my phone chimed the way it does when the email server pings a high priority. I didn't need to look. I had set it to ping when this restaurant's domain hit my inbox. The scent of seared butter was thicker now. A small fog. Two things were suddenly missing from the podium. That pen with the groove, and a small brass key that had sat by the reservation book when we arrived before the hostess leaned to sing. I marked that without looking down, because missing keys have their own predictable choreography. I also noted the way the corner of the seating chart had a faint smear. Not wine, not lipstick printer toner. The kind that comes off on your palm if you've fanned pages too soon after they come out. Someone had printed this list too close to the hour. It was 8. We're all okay, my mother whispered, and I almost believed it. We were all okay in that. We were warm and together, and our reservation existed. We were not okay in the way quiet accumulates like a debt. The rooftop railing was cold metal. Down on the street, a vendor knocked to steel tongs together, an impatient symbol. A waiter with jawline sharp as a blade moved past and ghosted us a glance that said he'd seen this script. And it was always different with family. Rafi angled his radio toward his mouth, thumbed the transmit button, and said something that sounded practical and harmless. The hostess lifted the ledger, and under it, where the brass key had been, there was a pale square of dust. It felt like a small door had been opened and closed. Mezzanine niche, the hostess said finally. For 8:10 p.m. Special request notes. Privacy. No surprises. Family. She had the voice people adopt when they try to save face with an equal. That's what it says. My hands were steady and my voice was steady. And because both were steady, the room shifted an inch in my direction. Perfect, I said. We'll be there by 10. In the meantime, I'd appreciate an apology for the way my name was handled in front of other guests. Rafi's shoulder rose and sank. Anila, he said, emphasizing every syllable like he wanted credit for the number of them. Let's not escalate. They're just trying to do their jobs. I don't shout. I use process and receipts. No one is being escalated, I said. I'm requesting compliance with your own guest dignity clause. The smallest pause. Another gust. The pen with the groove reappeared in the hostess's hand. It had left a faint ridge on her lower teeth to top teeth marked like small chalk lines. She glanced down at the podium. A corner of a laminated card slid into view. From beneath the ledger, staff conduct, reminders. I didn't need to read it. I had seen versions of it everywhere. I leaned back, folded my grandmother's scarf tighter, and let the cold open finish composing itself. The rest began 3 weeks earlier when I flew home with a suitcase of sweaters. A little too warm for Karachi and a laptop full of December audits. I was coming off 2 months of work across 3 cities, the kind where you count nights by hotel smells. I do process audits for hospitality groups. I am the unannounced Tuesday morning and the Wednesday afternoon that moves a ravioli machine away from a blocked fire exit. I am the independent consultant who reads your logbooks like they are short stories with a twist. In November, I had spent a lot of time in elevator back corridors, where you can tell how a place thinks about people by whether the paint stops where paying guests stop. I am paid to ask for copies of things no one touches unless someone like me calls the meeting. I'd promised myself that when I got home, I'd keep my laptop closed for a week. Instead, the first night back, I opened it because Rafi had texted, "Need your help with a family dinner thing," which is a kind of siren in our clan. He'd been a server through college, a barback, then a bartender, then a shift lead. The restaurant, Aqua Terrace, was new and gorgeous and perched on a building that had once been a shipping office. He sent me a photo of the rooftop at sunset. The tables like little planets lit from within. That See a slick coin behind everything? They know me here, he wrote. I can get us the good space for that Friday. Say yes. I said yes with a caution of someone who knows that public generosity often costs staff more in the back than it pays in the front. I asked if we could pay in full, in advance, if we could avoid staff comps. We could book early so the kitchen schedule didn't bend around us. He said yes and yes and yes, in that order. I asked for written confirmation and a point of contact who would be on site that night. He sent me a screenshot with the name Sophia, AGM. I saved her as S because I don't put full names into contacts until I've seen how a person behaves. A habit. Another thing I noticed, on the screenshot, the margins were too tight for a standard phone. The way a compressed PDF looks when someone had sent him a document not meant for texting. We're good, he wrote. Chef is excited. I told them, you're picky in a good way. The week between the text and that rooftop was full of small returns that tasted like learning to breathe again. The radio my father keeps on in the kitchen tuned to the same channel it was tuned to when I was 10. The cheap fan in the hallway that whistles because a screw is missing since 2001. The neighbor's kid? Saad had started an internship at a logistics firm and asked if I'd look at his CV, which I did, then turned that into helping him prep for his first real meeting, where he would be the only one under 30 in a room of people who think meetings are performances. He told me he wanted to find a way to correct a manager without seeming to. And I told him there is a way. Ask a question with a timestamp in it. When you say by end of day, I taught him to ask, which clock are we using? He laughed into his tea, then wrote it down and underlined it twice. There were red flags. There always are. The first was how Rafi reacted when I asked about gratuity. I'll take care of our server, he said. Which sounds generous if you don't know what it means in a place where management often thinks cash tips are reservoirs. I asked for the gratuity to be on the invoice and for that invoice to be countersigned by the AGM. He sent me a photo of his hand holding a printout, with a total amount and the word "grot" in blue pen. No countersignature. They'll sign the official one tomorrow, he wrote. The second flag was the voice note from him in which he coached me to keep it low-key with the staff because they get nervous when they hear the word audit. I hadn't told anyone what I do. And he had told them in a way that made me suspect he had been using me as a kind of credential in the building. The third was small, a gap on the invoice where the mezzanine niche fee should have been. And in its place, a heavy underline underwaved. Waved things are levers. They are also ledgers. I marked it with a star in my notes. On the morning of the dinner, did two things I knew I wasn't supposed to do during my week off. I sent a one-line email to S from my work account. Appreciate your team's prep. Confirm mezzanine niche. No comps, prepay, okay? Invoice countersigned today, please. And I called my lawyer, a man named Kawar who regards gentle punctuation as his primary weapon. He said what he always says to me, be the archive you want to see in the world, which is both a joke and our shared religion. He reminded me of the city's hospitality code that spells out guest dignity requirements, and where to find the section on names and pronouns. He also said if something goes sideways, you know the order. Request. Remind. Cite. Escalate to GM. Escalate to owner document. File digital complaint. Copy the regulator. Be specific about time and place. And I told him I had already drafted a template and notes. Mid-afternoon. I walked past the restaurant to see their peak prep rhythms. I saw the standard deliveries, ice, microgreens, someone with a crate of bar fruit. A vendor arguing quietly about a missing case of imported water. I learned where the staff entrance was. I learned where the trash went. A man in a gray suit I didn't recognize did the lap of a person auditing a space for the first time, touching chairbacks, looking at corners the way light looks at corners. He paused by a storage closet near the elevators. The door was propped open with a basket of rolled napkins. Behind that door, I saw a set of keys on a brass hook, each with a tiny plastic tag, the old-fashioned kind from motels. I have a soft spot for keys. They are promises and threats in one. By 10 minutes to 9 that night, my family was gathering like someone had unpaused a game. And the rooftop air was colder than I'd planned. I had my scarf. The mezzanine niche was set fewer candles than I'd requested. A small difference that says something about how a place prioritizes labor at the edges. The host stand was staffed by the woman who would sing my name. Rafi swung close, tapped his badge. Introduced us in that way that says I'm the lens through which you should see these people. And then she leaned into the joke. She didn't know who we were. She knew who he was. Her smile was the kind that works 98 nights out of 100 and only misfires on a night like this. When someone tells you who they are on a rooftop in a city that loves its night air, believe them and file it. I asked for the apology because it's the procedure you ask for when you're about to ask for other things. The apology matters because if it can't be found in a room like this, other things also won't be found. Rafi reached for a resolution he knows works on smaller problems. "We good?" he asked, authorizing the answer with his tone. He began to write something in the margin of the seating chart. I watched his knuckles. I always watch where pressure goes. He wrote something shaped like a V. There are alliances, and then there are allies. My father, who avoids public fuss like he owes it money, stepped on my side of the line silently and said, "We're okay to wait." My mother folded her scarf and lifted the corner to check if the locking pin it uses had snagged. My aunt, who once out-targeted a bank manager with nothing but a receipt and a smile, had taken a position where she could see both the mezzanine and the elevator. Saad, the neighbor kid, texted me then, "If someone tries to sell you the idea that a problem is logistical and not moral, ask when the schedule was printed." I looked over at the hostess's chart and at the toner smear, and I smiled because my student was learning. I typed back, "Noted. Good catch." I closed my phone. "Apology," I said again, gently. The hostess glanced at Rafi like she was asking him where the low ceiling of her autonomy was. He nodded. "Sorry," she said. It was a good sorry, not a mumbled one. But she kept her eyes on Rafi and not me. To her, I said, "Not to you," and the words turned the temperature down 1/2 degree. She looked at me then. "I'm sorry," she said, and the room adjusted again. It is very easy to conflate apology with admission. It is not. It is a step in the correct direction on the map. The mezzanine niche took us. The night tried again. Rafi tried to make a toast and I let him because I am not here to win rooms, only to fix scenes. The cutlery was too light. The water came in cold bottles beaded with sweat. The sea's breath got inside the napkins and made them damp at the edges. I could hear the barback smashing ice with a hammer. 3 beats, then 2. The server assigned to us, a woman named Mina, said hello in the tone of someone who reserves her best energy for people who don't make her justify her name. My grandmother's scarf slid against my neck and left a faint pattern in my skin like a memory that insists. At 9:30, a script line slipped into the night. The quartet at the far table, one of whom had sung my name, said loudly to Mina, "We ordered the mezz 15 minutes ago." And the word 15 hit the mezzanine's stone wall and came back warmer. Mina smiled with her mouth but not her eyes and said, "Our kitchen fires mezz, as per ticket time, sir." And the sir hung like an unpracticed trick. Rafi's radio buzzed with a code I didn't recognize, and he left us for a second. The hostess, who had apologized, appeared near the storage closet. Her hand went to the brass hook. The small key was gone. She moved a notebook to cover the blank square where it had been. At 9:45, a message popped into my inbox from S, time-stamped 9:40, subject line, tonight. It contained the countersigned invoice, an addendum with the dignity clause highlighted, and a PDF with incident documentation guide. Guests, I let my eyes rest on that phrase, because it is rare and beautiful to see a restaurant share its internal guide with a guest without needing to be asked. The addendum had a small, Interesting footnote. If any staff member uses a guest's name in a derogatory manner, service charge is voided by manager authorization. Incident logged. Training escalated. Apology offered by manager on duty. A policy is a promise if you ask. It is also leverage if it isn't offered. At 9:50, I got up and walked back to the host stand. The rooftop was louder now, the wind less toothy. I could smell rosemary and char. Please ask your manager to join us for a moment at the mezzanine. I said to the hostess, we'll keep it brief. She said she would. Raffi reappeared with 2 plates in his hands like he needed to. Demonstrate utility. I brought the oysters, he said, which was sweet and not the point. Safia, the AGM, arrived at the mezzanine at 9:57, hair pinned back with 2 precise clips. A clipboard in her hands, a pen tucked behind her ear. She greeted my mother first, then my father, then me, which is how you do it when you understand rooms. She said, welcome and thank you for trusting us with your family night. I heard there was an issue with a name at check-in. I'd like the opportunity to apologize and to tell you what I've done. She didn't look at Raffi when she said it. She faced me like the ledger would record the direction of her eyes. Competence is a scent. It smells like starch and the inside of an envelope. I appreciate that, I said. We'll be brief. I watched Raffi's jaw set and I didn't soothe it. Safia explained that she had pulled the host stand recording, a small camera angled toward the podium. As they do for training and incident review, and had reviewed the audio. She said she had spoken to the hostess, who had apologized, and that she intended to void the service charge as per policy. Have the GM review training with the team and personally apologize for any disrespect I felt. She asked if there was anything else she could do to repair. She spoke cleanly in clauses, without extra heat. I asked for one thing. Please note in the log that voiding the service charge is not the same as a discount. We will leave the gratuity in cash to be recorded and distributed in compliance with your policy. And please have the manager on to duty yourself make a brief acknowledgement to my family that their name is welcome here. S's. Safia inclined her head, wrote as I spoke, then did the rarest thing. She turned to my family and said, your name is welcome here as is. It was not performative. It was instruction and vow. The room shifted its weight. You could feel the mezzanine grow by a foot in every direction. Raffi tried to lighten it with a joke about me being an auditor, and his voice found no purchase. He had wanted to be the hero tonight. He was not. Not because he couldn't be, but because he wouldn't do the work that makes a hero credible. Receipts, not charm. He set the oysters down, and one of the shells clicked against the plate like the closing of a small case. I have 6 habits. I log everything. I timestamp my own speech when it matters. I ask for policies in writing. I give people the easiest path to correct a wrong. I accept apologies when they are offered in the right key. And I do not turn private errors into public humiliations unless I am forced. This night did not require force. It required precision. It required the quiet, formal grace of procedure. At 10:05, I noticed the brass key again. It had materialized back on the hook near the storage closet. The notebook no longer covered the pale square. The hostess's jaw had a faint, shallow bruise where the pen had rested too long during her shift. Little marks of labor. We ate, we passed plates. We did the thing that happens after a small war when you are allowed to be a family again. Mina, our server, took care of us the way people do when they are freed from the shadow of someone else's poor script. Each course landed like a point made and accepted. The mezzanine's light had gone warmer. The air smelled less of metal and more of sugar and flame. The oysters were clean and cold. The biryani was a perfume in a bowl. The halibut broke with a sigh. I noticed that the bread knife had a hairline nick near the tip and thought about how many nights it takes for a restaurant to wear in. I thought about how many apologies it takes to make a place soft enough for people to put their names down without flinching. Halfway through the night, Safia returned. Just to confirm, she said, the service charge is voided. I've noted that gratuity will be left in cash. For transparency, the total service charge would have been 10,100 PKR. I've recorded the void with voucher number 447A. I've escalated the incident to the GM, copied HR training, and noted the policy citation. She looked at me as she spoke, then at my father as she named the number because she understood where money sits in our house. I asked her for the incident number for our own notes. It 9 to 57, she said. I wrote it on a slip with the time and date. The slip joined the invoice in my wallet, and that feeling, the one where a room's temperature normalizes, found me. We were all okay. Now we were. Rafi, whose pride is both his engine and his anchor, didn't speak for a while. He ate carefully, like speech would spill if he tried. When he finally did talk, it was to tell me that the hostess had been under pressure, that their POS had frozen, that the quartet who sang my name had demanded a table switch, that he'd been holding 5 things at once and had tried to preempt a complaint by making us laugh first. I listened because I am not a judge. I am an adjuster. I told him the truth, that his intent didn't fix the result, that all he had to do was face me directly and say, "That wasn't okay. Here's how I'll repair it, and then do that." He said he understood. He was not used to being told to repair in the presence of the person who had been cut. He is the kind of man who does repair alone in the back room where the boxes are, where he can be the hero without witnesses. Later, when the coffee came and the rooftop had thinned and the wind pulled less at the tablecloths, the quartet passed us on their way out. One of them said, without breaking stride, "Nice name," and it was another small apology. I accept apologies in the right key. It was enough. The rest is paperwork, and paperwork is a love language. After my family went home, after Rafi had done his rounds and the barback had banged the last block of ice into obedient pieces, I asked to see Safia in the office. It wasn't an office as much as a steel table behind a frosted door with a window that looked like an old mailbox slot. The air was cooler in there. The light was a yellow that looks honest even when it isn't. There was a bulletin board with the week schedule pinned at 4 corners, and beneath it a laminated card with a list of policy excerpts, staff breaks, emergency procedures, guest dignity. Safia offered me a chair and poured water out of a jug that had the faint cucumber of the bar's prep water. We did the dance of 2 people who know how to write things down. I wrote an email to the restaurant's public account with the subject incident IT 957 acknowledgement and thanks, so the public account would hold the documentation I needed if anyone tried to rewrite the night. In it, I summarized the facts: the time, the words at the host stand, the apology, the policy citation, the service charge void voucher number, the manager response, the training escalation, the gratitude. I copied S and the GM address Safia provided. I attached a scan of the countersigned invoice and the addendum. Safia watched me type, which is unusual and correct. You don't let documentation be an oral tradition. I asked her if she wanted me to copy HR, and she smiled with something like relief and said, "I already did." I am a person who likes thresholds. There is the moment before you press send and the moment after. There is the evening before your family is seen and the evening after. There is a name before it is sounded right in a room and the name after. There is a cousin before he understands that heroism without receipts is theater, and the cousin after. With the email sent, we entered the after. On the way out, I stopped by the brass hook one more time. The key hung there, tagged with a number and a word I couldn't quite read. The storage door was ajar by an inch. In the dark inside, a small light glowed, maybe a router. Maybe a fridge temp monitor, little steady heart behind everything. I closed the door gently, heard the latch catch, and thought about safekeeping. The rooftop air met me again like a dog that forgives. Mina was cashing out at the PAs, counting tips with the focus of someone who has counted other things for other people without a cut. I handed her a sealed envelope with her name written in the clean block letters. My grandmother drilled into me an envelope I prepare for dinners always. A ritual that says some things should be done with paper you can hold. I watched her tuck it into her apron and saw her mouth soften. I do not need public gratitude to confirm private arithmetic. What happened after was not cinematic. It was administrative. It was the public stage being used as it was meant to be used. Not to shame, but to certify. 2 days later, Safia sent a screenshot of the internal training update. Names and pronouns. Refresher. Week 2 with a note that said she had added a segment about how to correct peers without making the guests do the labor. The GM wrote a 3-line note thanking me for my clarity and promising that the host stand camera audio would be used for training only, not punishment. The hostess sent a message through Safia addressed to me by both names, spelled correctly, with a line that said she understood now that playful is different when you're in a position that holds the ledger. Rafi avoided me for a fortnight, then came by with a box of cardamom biscuits and a speech he had clearly rehearsed. He had left his job at Aqua Terrace to take a position at a place that takes policy like gospel. He said he was tired of being the translator between management and dignity. He needed a room where those to speak the same language. In between, other ripples moved quietly and correctly. The restaurant updated the template for incident acknowledgments, so it had the voucher number line as a prompt. HR added a field in the PAs to note guest name corrections, which meant the act of acknowledging. A name could be recorded and therefore measured. Safia invited Mina to shadow a manager's meeting. The quartet from that night returned a week later and asked, as a joke that had corrected itself, if they could try pronouncing my name again. They were told that the mezzanine was booked for a private event. So they went downstairs, ate at the bar, and, if I'm guessing right, learned something unremarkable and correct about sharing rooms. There are things I don't want to dramatize because they were quiet. Saad sent me a photo from his logistics firm to meeting room, the yellow legal pad, the words which clock underlined in his careful hand. He had corrected a senior manager that day by asking about time zones. He had not made a show of it. He had used a process. He had been invited back into the room after. My mother began to say my full name again in public, like the room was built for it. My father started writing our family name on the backs of photographs of the grandchildren. And I did not correct the way he looped the tail. Because legacy is a braid of handwriting and policy and rooms where no one makes a joke about how to say it. The last loop to close is about the brass key. A week after the dinner, I met Safia for coffee. She handed me an envelope not sealed, a photocopy of a page from the logbook dated the night of our dinner. On it, in clean block letters, a note: lost mezzanine storage key found 20 to 13. Beneath it, a second line: policy refresher scheduled. And a third: guest requested acknowledgement instead of discount. The edges of the photocopy were uneven, a little light at the corners. I folded it and slid it into the back of my journal, where I keep small artifacts that tell me systems can learn. I don't need that key. I like knowing it exists, tagged in on a hook, taken down and put back by hands that have learned to do both with care. When I walked past Aqua Terrace a month later, the wind had different teeth and the air smelled like firecrackers. Someone had hung paper lanterns against the winter light. Inside the host stand window, the seating chart was printed cleanly. The corners were sharp. No toner smudges. The laminated staff conduct card sat on top of the ledger, not under it. The brass key, a coin of authority, was present. The host on duty, a man this time, said good evening to a woman whose name I knew to be long. He said it in full. He did not sing it. She smiled in a way that said she had prepped to forgive and had not needed to. There are 3 times to say a line. Early, so the night knows your terms. In the center, so the room knows your spine. And late, so the after knows how to walk. Say my name with respect. Say my name with respect. Say my name with respect. If you've ever been softened into silence over a name, take this as your copy-paste permission to ask for the policy. Request the apology and hold the room with receipts. If you want me to write more stories like this, share this one with someone who needs the map.